Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cavan-Smith. Tonight, 7 people are convicted of terrorism and murder over the 2010 World Cup bombings in Kampala, in which dozens of people were killed. The attack was Al-Shabaab's first outside of the group's native Somalia. Also, a day of nationwide protests against a possible delay to upcoming elections sees 2 reported deaths in the eastern city of Goma. Demonstrators suspect Congolese President Joseph Kabila of angling to extend his rule. And Chevron shuts down its onshore oil facilities in the Niger Delta after militants attack a terminal there. The group, called the Niger Delta Avengers, want locals to get a greater share in corporations' oil profits and have recently intensified attacks. Well, first, 6 years after 76 people were killed in Uganda by a series of bombings during the 2010 World Cup, 7 people have been convicted of terrorism and murder by a Kampala judge. 5 others were acquitted. It was the first major trial in East Africa of suspects linked to an Al-Shabaab attack outside of Somalia. Ugandans, Kenyans and Tanzanians were amongst the suspects. One, a Ugandan called Issa Luyima, was identified by the judge as the mastermind of the bloodshed. Those found guilty could face the death penalty when sentences are handed down on Friday. Michael Hagan was in court on Thursday. He tells us why it took the judge 7 hours to deliver his judgment.
This was the culmination of a massive logistical response to what you say was Al-Shabaab's first attack outside of Somalia. The investigation spread across East Africa. Suspects convicted today came from Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and had trained and fought in Somalia. The FBI helped with the investigation, and FBI special agents gave evidence during the trial. Last year, the lead prosecutor was assassinated, and so it was very important to the trial judge that today he cover every area of law and evidence meticulously. He wanted to make sure that there could be no criticism or very limited criticism about the process, and so he took a full day to deliver his judgment.
So as you mentioned there, Michael, the suspects came from a number of countries. So how important is this trial to regional concerns about the Somali militant group?
The trial is central to regional concerns. Security forces acted very closely together to arrest, detain, question, and transport the suspects to Uganda. Some of those convicted today have accused security forces across East Africa of colluding in torture, although the judge rejected those accusations. And looking to the future, the governments across the region would like to use the lessons learned during this trial, how to gather evidence, how to respond to the international community as a template in case similar things happen again. Of course, tragically, there have been bombings, Al-Shabaab attacks after this one in 2010, particularly in Kenya, in Westgate and Garissa.
Michael O'Hagan there for us. Well, police in Ivory Coast say that they've arrested the driver of the truck used in the Grand Bissam attack, in which 19 people were gunned down on a beach in the tourist resort in Ivory Coast. The Secret Service claim that the man's vehicle was also seen in Bamako and Ouagadougou. Both cities suffered fatal extremist attacks last year. A protester and a police officer, were reportedly killed in the eastern Congolese city of Goma on Thursday as security forces tried to break up a protest against a possible delay to presidential elections, which are, for now, slated for November. Opposition leaders accuse President Joseph Kabila of trying to stall the vote. The constitution bars him from running again, but a recent court ruling has given him the green light to remain at the helm if the polls are, as expected, delayed. Anti-Kabila demonstrations were also held in the capital, Kinshasa. Thomas Nicolon sent us this report.
The march began peacefully in Kinshasa on Thursday morning, with thousands of people turning out to the rally organized by the opposition. But then, some of the protesters decided to change the route agreed with the authorities. Police then prevented them from moving forward. Rocks were reportedly thrown and officers responded with tear gas. But the protesters say security forces were the first to resort to violence.
They threw canisters of tear gas. They didn't let us march peacefully. We really feel let down. We're disappointed with the police's behavior.
Despite the violence, opposition leaders are happy about Thursday's demonstrations. They say that the Congolese people have made their voices heard.
The governor wanted to impose his routes for our protest, but we said no, we have to do what we decided to do. And we are happy, and we want to congratulate the Congolese people for no longer being afraid and for understanding that Mr. Kabila, like all Congolese people, must respect the Constitution.
Security forces maintain that the protesters were the first to show hostility. They claimed that around 35 police officers were injured.
We set up a cordon so they couldn't go further. Unfortunately, when they arrived, they pushed against the police line to reach the government building. We said, no way. And then they started throwing stones. And then we used tear gas to disperse them. That's what happened.
Political unrest has plagued Congo for months, and Kinshasa wasn't the only city to see rallies against President Kabila Thursday. At least 50 people were arrested at gatherings across the country, once more taking tensions up a notch ahead of elections scheduled for November.
That report there by Thomas Nicolon. Well, Kenya's scrambled to overhaul its laws once again in a bid to avoid a possible Olympics ban. On Thursday, MPs passed amendments to an anti-doping bill after the world's anti-doping agency earlier ruled that it still wasn't up to scratch. Lawmakers came back from holiday for the vote in a bid to avoid the country's athletes being locked out of the Rio Games. Dozens of the country's sports people have been involved in drug scandals over the last 3 years. Well, the Nigerian oil ministers called on the government to look again at creating local benefit from the oil taken from the Niger Delta by international corporations. The warning came after militant attacks blew up a terminal there. They're fighting for a greater share of the oil profits and have recently intensified raids.
Stealing oil and putting pressure on international firms. Militant group the Niger Delta Avengers claimed responsibility for an attack on a Chevron facility in Nigeria's southern region. The latest attacks on foreign oil companies have contributed to dropping production of crude to a 20-year low in a country where oil sales account for around 70% of national income.
First and foremost, we've got to determine what do these people want. Is this a struggle for environmental friendliness? Is this a struggle for self-determination? Is it a struggle for resource control? So the first thing to determine is what is it that they want? And then what have we got to offer them, right? It's only after that point that we can begin to determine what the likely outcomes will be.
In response, last week the government sent army reinforcements. But some people think the attacks won't stop until people living in the region also get their share of oil profits.
Transnational companies are interested in having tranquility, right? The federal government is interested in having tranquility, okay? Perhaps the only person that is not interested in tranquility may be the youth that is not what? Developed, that is not trained, that is not given an opportunity. We should guide them, all these interest groups, in the way forward. And the way forward is to have these guys properly guided, which includes education, training, job opportunities, and so on.
Back in 2009, the government inked an amnesty deal offering cash and jobs to militants in exchange for a truce. But last year, Nigeria's president cut funding for the deal. In the wake of the latest raids, authorities have said they're considering relaunching the aid program.
Well, finally, Cape Town's trying to get boy racers off the roads and onto legal routes. And a series of events have been held at the Killarney racetrack where drivers can burn rubber along the straight 400-metre line course, which some cover in as little as 9 seconds. In the city, drag racers who speed away from traffic lights are called robots. And as police crack down, the sanctioned alternative has been dubbed the robot races. They're often packed with both drivers and spectators indulging their need for speed. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, and please do so again if you can. Take care.
Hello there, this is Live from Paris on France 24.
Get connected with France 24 social media. Take the first step. Tweet, like, become a fan of, break away from your TV. Find another dimension. Become even more linked up to the news with France24.com, together with our mobile and tablet apps. France 24. Get a connected view of the world.